And a big welcome to all of you who are in the choir and to those of you who are guests. And this is our third and final Q&A that we've offered to for the public this season. And we're really, really, really happy to have our friend Laura Hawley here. She is in Edmonton and we are in Ottawa, and it's going to be really awesome. And I hand it over right away to Jenna, who's going to interview Laura.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you and welcome. And thanks, Marg, and to all of our technical team. And of course, as was already mentioned, if you'd like to leave your questions in the question box, which I call it the question box, but it's the chat function, at the end of the interview, the formal part of the interview, we'll open it up to questions from the audience. So you can either leave a question there, or you can use the raise hand function later on when we get to that part. But let's bring in this incredible composer, educator, pianist, fantastic musician who we're here to listen to today and learn a bit more about. Of course, Laura Hawley is very well known to our choir. We commissioned work from her, which we'll hear at some point during the show. But she's also been commissioned by the best groups, the finest ensembles across Canada, from Electra Women's Choir to the Canadian Chamber Choir. Many groups have worked with her across the country, and she's really making a name for herself in all these different ventures that she's pursuing. So welcome, Laura. It's so nice to see you, and I can see there's a piano in the background and there's still light out where you are.
Yep, I'm in Mountain Time, so and the days are starting to get really long here. I don't know if everybody knows about these long days that we have in the summer, but by June we'll be able to read outside until 10 p.m.
That sounds lovely to us in Ottawa, who have been, well, I mean, we've been having a little bit of a spring awakening, so I can't complain too much. We actually had a really warm day today. So Laura, I want to start out right from the beginning. I want to hear about your childhood and how music became a big part of your life and where that took you. So why don't you tell us a little bit about where you grew up and how music influenced you at that time?
Sure. I was actually born in Toronto, but I don't remember very much of that because we moved away from there when I was 3 years old. We moved to a small town 3 hours north of Toronto called Port Elgin. It's a little beach town. Growing up there, I guess a lot of people growing up there would say that there's just nothing to do in a small town, but I was always extremely busy with musical things and also going to the beach. So I had a musical household growing up. My mom's a conductor. I think all y'all there probably know my mom, Jackie Hawley. She has the Cantamo choirs. I have actually a tape of me singing with my mom, age 2, where you can kind of hear her playing the guitar, and she sings like, you know, like Yankee Doodle went to town, and then there's like a little pause, and then you hear like doo-dah. So music was a thing, I think, my whole life. In fact, when my mom was pregnant with me, she was a music student, so I feel like I did my first music degree before I was born.
I wish we had, you know, garnered that footage of you as a child singing. You didn't put that forward as one of our potential things to listen to.
I did not include that. I do not own the technology to play that tape anymore, so yeah, I don't know what to do about that. So yeah, I started with piano lessons. That was my first kind of formal lesson situation. We had a neighbor whose backyard adjoined to our backyard. She taught piano, so that's where I started. And then I wanted to play the violin. I received a violin when I was, I think, in grade 2, and had violin lessons and played in the orchestra in town. And there was a wonderful children's choir. I joined that choir, and eventually, actually, my mom became the conductor of that choir. The last thing that we did as a choir before moving to Ottawa was a tour of Austria, which was incredible. First time on an airplane. Lots of first times for small town me. And my brothers also went on that tour, so it was a pretty big deal for the family. Yeah, it was. So we had lots of music going on all throughout childhood.
And did you always know throughout that time that music was going to be a central component of your life?
I don't know if that's something I thought about much. probably, I always knew it would be part of my life, but I didn't really know that I was going to become a musician. I actually wanted to be a vet most of my life. And then when it was time to apply for university, it was sort of the decision, like, am I going into science or am I going into music? And I sort of felt like I already was a musician, and I think I'll just keep doing that. So that's what I did.
Well, lucky us, I guess, is the way we should look at that decision. So let's hear something off the top. This will be familiar to our choir because we've sung it, the majority of people in our group. But to those who haven't yet heard it, this is Sonnet 43. Do you want to set up a little bit about Sonnet 43, Laura?
Sure. I wrote this in 2013. And this was a moment where I was really making a decision about developing myself as a composer. I had a friend who writes a lot of music that's published by Oxford, and he had said to me, why don't you try to get something published by Oxford? And this coming year, there's a big Shakespeare anniversary. I think it was like the 400 and something anniversary of Shakespeare's death, and they'll probably put it out an anthology. So why don't you just like set a sonnet or something like that? So I actually just wrote this piece hoping that it would get published by Oxford, which it didn't. And I also entered it in a competition. I think it's every 2 years or every year, this particular competition. And this is the only year I know of where they felt that all of the entries were so poor that no one received the prize. They just didn't award it. But I think this is like one of my most performed pieces. So who knows? Some people love this, some people.
It just goes to show that competitions certainly don't tell everything. And sometimes judges are having bad days, because I agree. I think a lot of people really love this piece. So let's listen to it. Sorry, Hattie. Let's cue that up now. Mm-hmm. think both of us were bopping our heads along. I could see you doing that. I love teaching that rhythm with Marg to the choir, and I can probably sing all of those parts, so it's hard. I have to jump around in my head when I'm listening.
Oh,
How do you feel listening to that piece?
Oh, I love that piece. I think I'm allowed to say that about my own piece. I've had so many happy experiences like conducting it and singing it, and I love the sonnet. I think it's so cute. And actually, some people were sending me messages about how much they like it, so that was really nice.
I know our choir really loved it, so I'm happy that that's the place that we're starting from. So you talked a bit about your childhood. Let's go a little bit further. So once you did make that decision between science and music, and you got into a bit more of your professional career, what was your early life like as a professional musician, and how did you kind of string things together and shape the portfolio career that you have today?
I've been really lucky. When I did my university studies, I did an undergraduate degree in piano performance, and then I did a master's in music theory. And my focus was, I was really interested in more abstract theoretical models, so I focused on developing an analytical model for analyzing improvised vocal jazz. And at the time, I was thinking I would stay on with academia, and in the end, I decided not to keep going beyond the master's. I think I like a career blueprint that does a lot of different things, and I didn't think I could be totally fulfilled dedicating myself totally to research and being in that academic zone all the time. So I had a waitressing job lined up for when I finished, and I didn't need to do that. Although actually I kind of was excited about it. I think that would be an interesting thing to try out. But when I finished university, I was offered a position in a church as music director at St. John's South March in Canada. And I hadn't really thought about becoming a church musician, but I'd been singing in the Anglican chorale, and I thought, I'll do this for a year. I did it for 11 years till I moved to Edmonton. And then I was accompanying, I was involved in a lot of choirs when I first started working after school. It was a bit too much. I was accompanying a lot. I was teaching at home. I taught history, harmony, piano. Some really long days. I had one day that I would teach, I think I taught 11 till 2, and then 3 till 6, and then 6:30 till 9:30 or something like that. But I was right away making my living full-time as a musician, which was incredible. And then slowly over time, I think I realized at one point at a Christmas time, I remember a defining moment of taking a bow on stage. And as I was bowing, I was thinking about, did I have concert blacks for the next day that were clean? And I thought, if you can't just be present at the end of the concert, maybe it's too much. So I started to kind of reshift things a little bit. And then in 2015, I started Hypatia's Voice, my women's choir. I think the moment I knew I wanted to start a women's choir was when I had gone to Festival 500 and I heard Lady Cove, and they were singing that Michael McGlynn piece, Jerusalem, all around at the opening concert. And I was sort of like gobsmacked, and I thought, I have to do this sometime. And then there were all these women, these incredible singers in Ottawa who wanted a place to sing together in that type of ensemble. So 2015, we started that, and yeah, it's sort of evolved more over time toward more conducting, more composing, and away from accompanying, which is tough. I really love collaborative piano, so I miss that part, but
it's tough. It's tough, I guess, when you're very good at many things, is what I'm learning from what you're saying.
Oh, that's very nice of you.
These branches available to you, but they all dovetail, and I'm sure that they've greatly influenced where you are now. So let's hear another piece before we get into exactly what you're doing during the pandemic. The next piece that we're going to listen to is Rise Up, My Love. So do you want to introduce that piece as well and tell us a bit about where it came from and its influences?
Yeah, this is a really important piece to me. Probably all my pieces are, but this one because in 2016, I visited Edmonton for the first time. and I was here for Podium, the biennial conference that Choral Canada puts on, and I had been asked to donate a commission to the auction. And I thought, oh my God, what if nobody bids? Like, of course I said yes, but I was really worried about what was going to happen with that piece. And then as things progressed, I was kind of keeping an eye on the bidding, and I thought, okay, people have bid, thank goodness. And then at the end, the person who won was Tim Shantz, who is the former artistic director of Spiritus Chamber Choir, and they had just won this huge award. I think it was the CBC competition. And I felt like a deer in headlights, and I thought, oh my God, now I have to write something for Tim Shantz. So that was an amazing moment for me because I had never met him before. He was like this very fancy conductor. I went up to him one day over lunch hour while he was eating a sandwich and handed him some of my music like prior to this. And I said, here's some sample stuff. You can just recycle it if you want, or you can try it out. And he bid on this thing. So it was a great moment, and they did a great job performing it.
Very exciting. So let's hear Rise Up, My Love. Just beautiful.
Thank you, Jen.
It's really, it's so lovely to listen to music together. I don't know how other people feel about it, but I don't feel like we do that often. So I'm sure people will comment in the chat about how they feel about it too. So of course we are very proud of your affiliation with Ottawa. And yes, many of us know your mother and the incredible work that she does here. But you're now in Edmonton and you've been there for a few years. So how did your career shift a little bit when you ended up in Edmonton? And what have you been doing during this pandemic year?
Well, I was thinking actually, as you were playing that video, I actually had the opportunity to work with that choir at the Band Center in 2019 as a conductor. I did a workshop with them, which I was similarly intimidated to do. And then I think actually, as I was doing that workshop, they had just learned that Tim would be leaving and moving to Edmonton. And many of them were hoping that I would apply for that position, which was very tempting. They're a wonderful choir, as you can hear. I couldn't quite imagine, I couldn't quite get my head around driving to Calgary every week. It's a 3-hour trip, but I also was really lucky here because within a year of moving here, I landed a job with the Camera Singers. And some of you might know Dr. John Bruff. He's an Ottawa guy. He'd been the director of the Camera Singers here for 14 years, and he was moving on, and so I applied. And I when I learned that position was opening, I just had such a good feeling about it. It felt like a great fit. I don't know why I had such a good feeling, because there were a lot of amazing people applying for that, but somehow they picked me, yay. So I'm now the artistic director of that choir. They're fantastic. They're an audition chamber choir. They do things like the first thing I did with them was Messiah with the Edmonton Symphony. So that was awesome. Great choir, great people. And then probably many of you know Scott Leathead. He's the artistic director of the Kokopelli Choirs organization. He called me, I think in the spring of 2019 and said, hey, if we started a women's choir as part of the Kokopelli Choirs organization, would you conduct it? We've been talking about doing it and we haven't done it, but if you would conduct it, we would do it, no pressure. So I thought about that for about 1 second and said yes. Also an amazing organization, so many great people part of that. And I've been writing a lot. The first year that I lived here, I still conducted Hypatia's Voice, so I was flying back and forth, and we were just finishing a really big commission. So that was a busy year. But the thing that's changed is I'm not teaching privately anymore. I just don't have time. And again, it's like, I miss that, but what can you do? You can't do it all. And I'm not officially accompanying any choirs. Sometimes I get called in to do a thing here and there, but it's really conducting now, and composing takes up a lot of time. I was teaching at one of the universities here, which I planned to do this year as well. Last year I taught composition, and this year I was going to be teaching some analysis and stuff like that. But with COVID, everything just takes so much longer to do that I just couldn't quite imagine fitting in the teaching and still trying to be like present as much as I need to for my choirs, because you just don't know what kind of pivot you're going to have coming from week to week. But there's lots of room to grow out here for sure.
Yeah, and you've also been involved in some commissioning projects with other composers, right? There's I saw a big project that you were doing with multiple composers. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
I would love to talk about that. Yeah, this is, it's called the Sonnet Time-Lapse project. It's a labor of love. A colleague of mine, Young Corker Lee, last year, yeah, almost a full year ago, said, hey, do you think it would be crazy to try to commission like a full concert of works that kind of came from the pandemic? And I said, yeah, I do. Let's do it. And I mean, we kind of evolved it because it's, you know, a full concert, that's a lot of music, but we commissioned 10 new works. We've crowdfunded it, or we're attempting to still raise money. We want to pay our composers more than we have so far, but the idea was to build a platform that would sort of stimulate our choral art economy. So we wanted to provide work for composers. We wanted to keep kind of the foot on the pedal, keep the foot on the gas of creating new music. And we wanted to figure out if we can offer the music more cheaply, because so many choirs were like, how do we afford to do anything this year? So we built this platform where you could fund it at certain levels and then have access to like 4 new works and composer videos and workshops that we developed. And it's a huge project, but something that we're really proud of.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic, and it kind of is this artistic community that's helping each other out and bringing new people into the fold, which is always important too. I saw that project and I thought, wow, that's really special. It's big, but it's also meaningful. It's not just about the size of the size and scope of what you're doing. It's about what you're putting forward. So
yeah, thank you.
yeah.
I feel like this is the moment where I should say, if anyone wants to donate to that project, we really need to raise some more money. So I'm just going to put the website in the chat. And if you feel like you've got an extra $10 or $100, feel free.
Go for it. Yes, please drop that in the chat. And while you're doing that, I'm going to mention what our next piece is, which is Droplets. And I think you wanted to introduce this piece as well, right? There are some interesting background to this, to Droplets.
Yeah, Droplets is a piece that I wrote for Procoro Canada this past summer. They commissioned, I think, 15 new works from Edmonton composers. Is that right? That seems like more than, anyway, it doesn't matter. A whole list, 8, thank you. 8 new works. And there was the suggestion that if we wanted to work with a poet, we could do so. So I contacted my favorite poet. Her name is Jenny Cousin. She's a Canadian poet, currently living in London, England. And she had just written this set of 5 poems called A Corona Sequence. And she sent me the link. They were published online in a Sufi journal. And the one thing that was really cool is that there was the poem and then there was an MP3 of her reading each poem. And at the time, I had been thinking about this idea. Like, I had talked to a friend who was a sculptor and was describing his sculpting process, and it was really interesting. And I thought, oh, I wonder, is composition like that at all? Like, I feel like with sculpting, you start with like a lump of something, like some wood or some clay, and you're finding the sculpture within. And I thought with music, it's kind of like there's nothing. Is it anything like sculpture? Which I guess if there's text, maybe it is. So I don't know. But I thought maybe if I just listen to her reading and I'll just transcribe the rhythm of how she reads this text, that would be a little bit like sculpting. And I'll just do this as an exercise and see where it leads. And that rhythm ended up informing a lot of the rhythm of the piece. The piece is about, it's about droplets, like as in we're all scared of droplets right now when we go out. So I was thinking about like what kind of musical character I could bring into that as well. So I set it in kind of like this, it's almost like a flamenco inspired thing where there's like a lot of passion and intensity, but in a very controlled kind of way, like kind of like how we all are when we try to grocery shop and it's like feels very intense and controlled. And then in the middle section, it's all contrapuntal, because the idea, the sort of punchline of this poem, for lack of a better term, is that all of the water that ever existed on the earth is like constant, right? So it's like, the glass of water that comes out of our tap might have been sailed upon by, indigenous people canoeing down the river hundreds and hundreds of years ago. So I kind of layered these lines on top of each other, so the verses end up being all sung at the same time. So yeah, that was a summer project.
Fantastic. Okay, let's hear it. That was very fun, you know, trying to correlate in your brain the clapping with the not clapping. But I'm just kidding. The audio is fantastic, and it's still beautiful to watch. So that's such a great piece, and so on point, you know, exactly as you described in these times. Now, you were talking about sculpting and this idea of where music comes from and composition. So I want to turn to your compositional style and process. How would you characterize your compositions in general, and how do you create them? Is it an easy process for you? Does it take a long time? Describe a bit.
This is such a hard question. I don't have a process that I stick to all the time. Sometimes it takes a long time and sometimes it's quick. I've had days where I kind of sit there all day and seem to have less material than I did when I started. And then sometimes like an idea comes and it just really naturally kind of goes along. One thing that I did last year is I took some lessons. I haven't actually studied composition, and I wanted to fix that. So I took some lessons with a professor at the University of Calgary, Alan Bell. He is the teacher of some really incredible composers. Carmen Braden, for example, from Yellowknife. Kelly Marie Murphy from Ottawa also studied with Professor Bell. So I went to Calgary several times, and those lessons were, he's just an incredible teacher, and then everything was interrupted by the pandemic. So I'm hoping to resume those, but he taught me an amazing system of really like exhaustively exploring ideas. So he said, you know, you have to sit and think about ideas without overthinking it. So he said, you know, start with like a staff paper that's like this big. And so I have this little binder, if I have it, where I just write down ideas. So it's just like pages and pages of this kind of thing. Some of it's just like text or like chords. He taught me how to kind of invent my own harmonic language and create like chords that are more dissonant than others, and how they voice lead. And you develop this a whole harmonic language that's your own, that kind of goes beyond what we know, like major and minor chords and upper chordal extensions. So you start with this, and then you'll pick one. He said, now pick one and then develop it exhaustively. So then you go to like a bigger piece of staff paper and say, I've got a 5-note melody that I like. Then I've got to take that little 5-note melody. Like this would probably make a lot of people want to jump off a bridge, but like I start with this little 5 notes, or however many notes. Yeah, it's 5. And then change the interval of the first 2 notes, like by a semitone, all the way out and all the way in, and the rest of the intervals stay the same. And then I do the same process with these 2, and then the same with these 2, and the same with these. And then you do it backwards, and then you do it upside down, and then you do it upside and backwards. So I got like 4 pages of little 5-note melody. But the amazing thing is, you'll see some of them have check marks, because then you go through and you retrograde inversion. That's it. You go through and you find like, oh, I really like this one, or, you know, some of them have a check mark and a heart. And I start to get this like really cool library of things that I wouldn't have necessarily come to intuitively. And they all relate to one another in some way. So this has been an amazing thing to do, because when a commission comes along, or a text that I want to work with, several times since I started doing this, I see the text and I think I know what the timbre and the mood of this is, and I know I have it in this book, so I can go there and find starting material and then start to develop it. That's when you kind of get to the bigger piece of staff paper. So that process has been amazing. Just for it's slower. Like I'm trying to really push myself as a composer to kind of explore new processes, because otherwise I just sit there and I try to remember a song I've never heard before. And of course I think about the text a lot, and you know, sometimes that works, but it doesn't always work.
That's incredible. And let's hear another piece and then come back and talk about this a bit more, because obviously develop different styles in your compositional process. And that's, of course, what it's like to evolve as a human too. So that's great. The piece that we're going to listen to next, I think, is audio only, if I'm correct. Is that right, Laura? Yeah. You want to introduce Absence very briefly?
Yes, this is one of the only pieces that I've written that was not a commission. Sonnet 43 is also like that. I wrote this at the Banff Center when I went for the first time to the Banff Choral Art Program in 2018. And it's an 8-part setting of a Pablo Neruda poem. And I was really interested in exploring some textures with this one, and also in seeing how long I could kind of like string out a certain emotion. So this is a different kind of texture. It's got Spanish text as well as English, and I kind of use it almost like a percussion instrument, some of the consonants and things. Hey, look at that. If you wish to follow along with the score, well done in the chat.
Yeah, perfect.
This is a really special piece for me.
Yeah, let's listen to it.
Oh, sorry about that. I tried to play it, but now it's asking me to download it, so that'll just take me a second.
Okay, that's not a problem, Hattie. We'll listen to 2 pieces back to back if it's going to take a minute. And since you just mentioned, Laura, about commissions, this is one of a few pieces that hasn't been a commission for you, but how has the commissioning process been like in the past for you? Have you enjoyed that process?
Yeah, it's really amazing to kind of get to write something like custom made for a choir. And, you know, sometimes it's really challenging to kind of try to sync up with a conductor's vision. It takes some time, especially if we relate to a certain subject in different ways. But I feel like that's kind of one of the interesting things about it, is like just trying to figure out exactly what it is that that ensemble and that conductor needs. I see the song is ready, so maybe I should.
Perfect. Yeah, let's listen to this song, and then we might go right into actually a commissioned work once you introduce it. So yeah, Hattie, let's listen to that song first, and then we'll come back for a minute.
Scarcely left you when you go in me, crystalline, or trembling or uneasy, who lay by me, or overwhelmed with love cries when your eyes close upon the gift of life that without cease I give you. I give you without cease. I give you my love.
I feel like we need to wait in that silence the same way you would after a piece finishes in a hall, you know, especially with just the audio. I think we should go right away to another piece of yours, which was a commission. Do you want to introduce the Wexford Carol?
Yeah, this is the third movement of Carol Trilogy, which was commissioned by Electro Women's Choir. In 2017, I applied for a competition to write for the Women's Choir, and I didn't hear back. So I thought, I guess I didn't get in. And so I wrote to Morna Edmondson, and she said, "Oh no, we do want you to write for the choir, but that competition is like, we want to do something much bigger with you." So they commissioned this 3-movement thing. They flew me out to Vancouver. It was incredible. So this third one is my favorite Christmas carol. And it was kind of a tough one to decide to actually set it, but yeah, here it is. This is Electra. I think this is the recording from their actual CD release in 2019 called On Christmas Night.
Perfect.
one more chord.
Yeah. It got a little quiet there at the end. That's just beautiful. And Mark pointed out to me that there was a Nova Scotian at the piano, so I have to mention that there was a Nova Scotian playing the piano.
I didn't know Stephen Smith was a Nova Scotian.
Yeah, yeah. So another kind of theme, I would say, in some ways, to a lot of what you do in your life and your music, whether it's purposefully gone that direction or it's just because of who you are as a person, is that you deal a lot with empowerment and social cohesion and bringing people together around different themes, around their culture, around ideas. And so we're going to listen to a piece that's called Call Yourself Beautiful. But before we do that, I'd love to hear a little bit about your thoughts on whether that this phenomenon that seems to be following you is the way that things are going now, or how you think that's come to be and why it's important to you.
This is such a big question. I don't know how it came to be. It was not really intentional, but I think it probably happened organically because it's just like kind of who I am. I think probably most of you know about the piece that went viral in 2015. It's called Vivre, Aimer, Partager. It was initially called Alhamdulillah. That was a commission from Robert Filion, who asked me to write he for a French choral festival. And where each year he said, we're not allowed to do anything, so I just get around it by doing everything. So he had done like a very Christian piece the year before, and he said, I want some choral work that touches the Muslim tradition, but it doesn't exist. So can you write something? And then it went up on YouTube. It was labeled Canadian Choir Welcomes Syrian Refugees. Great idea, whoever posted that. Cool. And then had millions of views. A couple of years later, Robert asked me to write another piece, and he wanted something Korean. So it's a partner song with a piece in Korean. I've worked with it's Nipit Katitut Voices United project up in Iqaluit. It's my mom's project in collaboration with the NAC, and co-wrote a piece with an Inuk singer-songwriter. That was an amazing experience and really actually changed. It was a game changer for me as a composer in terms of how I think about what gets written on the page. And it's interesting because now in the past few years, I've come to think more about like, would I say yes to those types of projects? Because I'm learning more and more about my responsibility to maybe hold the door for someone else who, maybe this is a piece that should be written by a Korean composer or an Indigenous composer or a Muslim composer. And at the same time, I did a talk with the choir last week, and it was about that piece that's in Arabic. And I had a collaborator also with me. She was a person who advised me on that piece, who was at the time working for the National Council of Canadian Muslims, and she spoke beautifully. Like when I made that comment, she spoke beautifully about allyship and how important it was that, I, as a white person who's not Muslim, said yes, and then came to her with an open mind, and we did this thing together. So it's a really interesting thing when there's a social thing happening, and we as artists feel called to respond to it. How do we do that responsibly? I don't know what the answer is. I feel like I have increasingly complex ideas about what to do, but it's an important thing to think about. This piece, Call Yourself Beautiful, was a challenging one to write because the conductor said she wanted something that would be like the Dove campaign in music, and she found this text online. We can't figure out who actually wrote it. We haven't been able to track down someone to get permission, but it was a really challenging text to set. It's like not even grammatically correct in certain spots, and I was like, oh, what am I going to do with this? I really struggled with this until I figured it out, and now I love this piece, but it was not an easy one. So this is fun because it's got like a really kind of pop anthem kind of style, which is not always how I like to write, but I do really like to write in this style. And it's got like a gospel-y section in the middle. It's got an aleatoric section where all the kids like yell out something that they're good at. And then it's got this like call and response section at the end. All the parents can like sing along if you want. And hopefully by the end, everyone's just like weeping.
That's fantastic. Okay, let's hear this thing. And I will just say, while you're listening and grooving along to this piece, think about questions, because when we come back, it's your turn to ask Laura whatever you think hasn't been covered. And of course, there's so much to cover. So I imagine the questions are going to be pouring in. Let's hear Call Yourself Beautiful.
Nobody tells you that it's okay to call yourself beautiful, that it's okay to smile at mirrors, and it is perfectly
Oh, I like the wild applause. We should have just kept that for like at the end, and we could just play it so that you would know that people were cheering wildly for you. So I'm sure you've been seeing all these fantastic comments in chat. I hope that you've been able to read some of them as they go along. This choir, this choir, of course, really has a place in their heart for you. So I'm not at all surprised. In fact, I think they're holding back a little bit. But I would like to open it up to them and to our guests. If you'd like to use the raise hand function, I'm just going to very quickly mention that it's for most people in their reactions button. When you click on that, there's a raise hand, and that'll bring you up to the front so that I can see that you've raised your hand, or you're welcome to leave a question in the chat also, or write in the chat, I can't figure out how to raise my hand, and I will also unmute you that way. So does anyone have any questions? Right away, Jane. Go ahead, Jane.
I have a question, Laura. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
Thank you so much, first of all, for being here tonight. We just so appreciate it. I'd like to know what inspires you now, particularly during COVID, but in general as well. What inspires you to write such beautiful music?
I love that question. So many things. It could be, for example, the sound of the ensemble. It could be something. The first piece that I ever wrote was the setting of In Flanders Fields, because I had visited Flanders Fields and it just did not. It was not at all what I expected it to be, and it really left like a feeling with me that I wanted to try to capture in music. So I thought I just have to get this out of my system and then I'm done. I didn't think I was a composer. I just needed to do that. I think that's actually the definition of being a composer. I wrote a lot of things for Cantiamo Girls Choir and was just inspired by them and their sound. Sometimes I'm inspired by like a message that I want to send, like that piece we just listened to. The inspiration was like, how do I want these kids to feel singing this? Sometimes it's something, my teacher, Professor Bell, he said, you know, you hear someone say, write about what you know. He said, don't write about what you know, write about what fascinates you. So I made a list of things that I find fascinating, and but it could be anything, you know. He also pointed out that anything can be translated into music. You know, you could take a plant and try to say like, okay, like what's going on with this plant and what is that like in music? So it's sort of a fun exercise to see like, what is there that could not be inspiring? Probably nothing.
I love that answer, and I'm sure Jane appreciated it too. I could see her giving a little symbol. Are there other questions from our audience and choir? Okay, I see Joy has a question. I'm going to unmute you, Joy.
Hi, Laura.
Hey.
You have that lovely book that your composition professor started you on, and you talked about your 5 notes. And I would love to know about where those 5 notes came from. How did they arise?
Well,
did you hear them? Did you create them randomly?
Those particular 5 notes I actually lifted out of another piece that I had written, like a short piece that I'd written as like a composition etude a couple years earlier that nobody liked. I think it's a great piece, especially the five notes. So I thought, well, I just worked with those. But when I'm doing these little ideas are really like to come up with those. I think the most important step is to not overthink it, to sort of just like get something down before that analytical or like ego brain kicks in. You've got to like sneak past the gatekeeper and like get the creative idea down, and it could be absolute garbage, but you just move on. And that's why developing them is an important part of it, because sometimes I could get down an idea and if I just stop there, it's like, well, this is boring. I remember in my first lesson, he was showing me this development thing and he landed on like 2 perfect fifths and he said like, isn't that the most disappointing sound you've ever heard? I write a lot of fifths, so I was like, but Yeah,
Well,
spontaneity.
the melody, How Can I Keep From Singing, which of course we all adore, is just such a beautiful, beautiful series of pitches. It's amazing.
Thank you.
Well, not to worry, because at the end of our questions, which we're coming to very soon, we're going to get to listen to that piece. So that's such a great segue, Joy. Thank you for your question. Does anyone else have a question? Oh, I see Neil does. Okay, we'll take Neil's question, and then if somebody else really wants to ask something, we'll take one more after that. But if not, we'll go to How Can I Keep From Singing? Neil, I'm going to unmute you now.
Hi, Laura. It's great to see you again.
Hi, Neil.
Is there a musical genre that you would like to write a piece in, say blues or jazz?
When you asked that question before you said blues or jazz, my first thought was that I would love to write more chamber music. Most of my music is for choir, and that's really where my home is. And that's really all I have time for, because I have the terrible problem of having so many commissions that it occupies all my compositional time. But if I had suddenly like a whole bunch of free time and wasn't worried about stuff like paying the mortgage, I would write like chamber music. I have ideas just waiting for a trio of bass clarinet and cello and piano, for example. Wouldn't it be cool to write a symphony? Man, I'd love to do that. Yeah, that's what I would do.
If there were choral attached to it, I'd be thrilled to do it.
Amazing.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you, Neil. Okay. If no one else has a question, which I'm kind of hoping they don't, because I have one more before we go into this next piece. Laura, I can't believe no one has asked, so I'm going to. Do you happen to have a pet? And if you do, could you describe this pet?
I do. I have 2 pets. I have a cat. His name is Wally. He's a Devon Rex. He's 12. He's recently gained a ton of weight, so he's kind of like an orange circle at this point with huge ears and a tiny little elf face. And I have a miniature Australian Shepherd who we've had for a year. Her name is Echo. She's black and white and has crystal blue eyes. Actually, I shouldn't have closed the door downstairs because she would come up and say hi, but maybe I'll invite her up while this is playing.
Perfect. And I do think, just because it has a very special meaning, and I saw your mom wrote in chat, do you want to just briefly mention a bit about this piece before we hear it? I know a lot of people in our choir know the piece intimately, but I'm not sure they really know the story. So,
oh, here she comes.
Whoa.
Come on up. Come on. There she is.
Hi, Echo.
This piece. Okay, that's good. There you go. This piece, I mean, this is such a special piece to me. It's a 5-movement work. It's my longest work. It was commissioned for your 50th anniversary. Then was commissioned in a new arrangement for the Canadian Chamber Choir and recorded. And I got to record it and tour that piece with Canadian Chamber Choir. Is it the third movement that which movement are we listening to?
I think we're listening to How Can I Keep From Singing?
Oh, the final movement. Okay.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so this, funny story. The first movement, we had permission to use the text from that movement. And I misunderstood reading the French and understood to mean that we had permission to use that song. So I thought, oh, this is interesting because this is mostly going to be an original work, but we're going to incorporate this song. Like, okay, cool. And didn't realize that until, of course, the piece was totally done. So thank God it ended up being okay. So the final movement actually combines what I did with that song with the music of the third movement, which is all an original composition. And a lot of this piece I dedicated to my mom. And I remember writing this and just like having an absolutely glorious time writing the piano accompaniment and knowing that you were going to play it. I knew I could kind of do whatever I would like. And I think this is the recording. This is the new version that replaced the bassoon with bass clarinet. So actually when we did the final recording, Jeff Riley, who many of you will know from CBC, worked with me on just some stuff. He sent, I shouldn't tell you this, but he sent me about 10 different improvisations, and I sort of like I just could pick and choose from those to kind of like piece together this like florid passage for bass clarinet, which you may or may not actually be able to hear, but that was a really cool process to be able to do.
And another Nova Scotian. Anyway, that's not
Yeah,
the point. So
right.
This is, of course, familiar to our choir, and choir, feel free to, you know, sing along at home as long as you're still muted. And this will be the last thing before we leave. So thank you so much, Laura, for spending the time with us and letting us hear more of your music and spend time listening with you. And of course, for everything that you're doing in the choral world, from our choir to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's great to be here and great to see your faces. I miss Ottawa. I miss y'all.
Okay, Hattie, let's listen to this piece. I almost don't want to say anything after that. Very, very special piece to all of us. So thank you. I think that with that, let's all give Laura a round of applause for spending some time with us, whether you do that this way or with the emoji, all of it's good.
Thanks, Laura.
Thanks, Marg. It's so good to see you.
Okay, Bill, I will hand it back over to you.
We have some memories from when Laura last rehearsed with us back in 2017, actually working on this piece. So Hattie, would you flash up those pictures, please? Some of the same faces still here.
I still have that green shirt.
I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I really missed that basement.
So we were having a good time. And Laura, I want to add my thanks for you coming all this way east tonight to join us in this celebration. And I also want to thank our sponsors who are keeping us going this year. Prospectus Associates, Habitat for Humanity, the Ottawa branch, Cal's Place, which is a family restaurant out in Stittsville. And we also receive support from the City of Ottawa through its arts funding program. And we want to thank all of you who have come tonight to join us and to hear Laura. And if you like this programming and want to see more of it, next year, I guess now, please go to our website and make a donation. Anyway, thank you very much. So this is the formal end of the session with Laura. Laura, you can hang on, but we're going to have announcements. So if you're not interested in announcements, you can bail. And after announcements, we'll have breakout groups. So you'll be able to share experiences with other people in random breakout groups. So I'll give you a few minutes if you want to bail.